Welcome back to Jacques in the garden. Today, it is feeling like spring. It is a very sunny, sort of warm day. It is cold at night still, so I know it is actually winter, but I'm feeling spring vibes. So today we're going to do some work in the garden, things that really need to get done. One of them is actually cleaning out a raised bed and planting some carrots. I'll show you my techniques for getting great carrot germination. And the other one is a little bit random as well, which is actually how to propagate and multiply your strawberry plants for free, because I have a bunch of them in the greenhouse that I really need to get into something else. So I'll show you that whole process as well. But first, let's go look at the garden and get some carrots in the ground. So I'll take you to the bed in question that we are working on today, but let me show you around really quick. You might have seen some of these updates in my last video, but I have made some progress on one of them. So let's kick it off with a quick view of the garden in general, and I wanted to highlight this bed over here, which is where I've been having gopher issues. Now the reason I figured this out is because the broccoli plant right over there was literally on the ground, so I could see that they chewed it up. This morning, I set some traps. You can see I have 2 gopher hooks here. I'm actually going to be testing out a bunch of gopher traps, but right there is the tunnel where that little gopher showed that it is indeed still here. And what that actually told me is something more interesting. Sometimes the garden is trying to send you a message, but you are not receiving it. For whatever reason, you aren't paying attention to the clues that it is trying to give you. And this right here was a clue that I ignored for quite a while, and it is the fact that this broccoli is not very big. Look at it, it's not a large plant, the leaves never got big, and it's already bolting. It's not hot, it's not too cold. There's no reason this broccoli should be bolting unless there's some other external stress, which is exactly the gopher hiding underground, eating every single root off this plant. So you have to pay attention a little bit to the garden for things like this. This bed right next to it has minor gopher damage, but even the broccoli itself looks better. So there is a notable difference. I did actually see some activity in here as well, and one of the plants fell over. So I think now it's moving into this bed, which is why it's so important that you pay attention and deal with those problems before they get out of control, which is what might already be happening here with this gopher taking over my garden. So this isn't a gopher video, so let's move on to the bed in question, where we are going to be flipping it. As I mentioned before, flipping is just taking the bed and turning it back into another sort of crop, or just regrowing something else in there. So let's take a closer look at this and I'll tell you my plan. So here we are at the bed in question. Up front, this is all going to remain. This is the perpetual spinach chard from Botanical Interest. I absolutely love this stuff. We're probably going to use a good chunk of that in some lasagna tonight. And behind it, I do have another set of plants that I will be keeping, which is my burgundy broccoli, which I absolutely love. So it's already starting to produce little florets. The plants themselves look pretty good. I have them spaced out, and as you can see, they are protected with the critter cages, because over here, there's been some digging. There's been some severe digging. You could see all the soil kicked up onto the lip of the bed there. And the only thing I really have left in here are these radicchios. Now, radicchio is ready to harvest now. You could see the outer leaves have started to die back, but the inner core is really that cherry on top that we want to eat. So let me snap this one off. There we go. You could see much more obviously what the radicchio looks like. So the outer leaves, generally a lot of people don't eat them. I'm gonna just go ahead and remove those. And right there, we've got ourselves a beautiful little radicchio, which will make for a great snack on a cheese platter. But again, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about cheese platters. So let's get this bed emptied out. I'll harvest all this radicchio, and then we'll move on to amending and planting carrots. Before we get any carrots planted in this bed, I've got to get rid of this radicchio. So I'm going to go through, harvest it. I'll show you guys how much I end up with. This is a new thing that I'm growing this year. I haven't grown radicchio before, but I still can't get over just how beautiful the actual plant and harvest is. It is such a stunning color and a unique plant that is very bitter. A lot of people find it an acquired taste, but I found that I really like sauteing it, and that's when it really shines for me. One of the things that I know is traditional for this plant, I don't know the reasoning, but I've seen it before, is that the outside of the leaves can actually rot just like this. And all you need to do is remove that sort of gross rotten layer. Then underneath, you should have a nice, beautiful head of radicchio. We'll see if that's true. And yeah, it is. But this one is just very, very tiny. But all those rotten layers, they just come right off, and you're left with a nice, clean interior. This one back here is by far the largest radicchio of the bunch. I didn't even know it could really get this big. So let's go ahead, cut this out. One thing I've noticed is that this is covered in worms. Like the lower leaves that are near the base are absolutely swarming with life. Oh God, you can see right there. The worms go crazy for this plant. I don't know why. So it must be very good for soil health. I also see a lot of potato bugs. Those guys are everywhere, but I've never seen worms literally up on the plant like they are on this. That's telling me something. I think that overall, even if this isn't something you enjoy eating, it might have some benefits to your garden that we just don't know that much about, or maybe somebody knows about and I just don't know. So let's clean this up. Looking pretty good. Get some of these gross outer leaves out, especially knowing that there's worms hiding in there. And right there, we've got a huge, stunning, beautiful head of radicchio. So I'm gonna get all these extra leaves over to the compost and then we'll get this bed ready. Overall, I gotta say, I am very pleased with the harvest of radicchio here. Let me know what you guys like to do with it at home. Now that we have the bed cleared out, let's go ahead and talk carrots. I have 3 different ones I'm going in with: Scarlet Nance, Tender Sweet, and Red Cord Chantenay. All of these are delicious carrots that have slightly different use cases, but in the end, they're just carrots. So why are we doing it in a raised bed is the first question I want to answer. The reason is because raised beds tend to have very nice, loose, well-draining soil. They don't tend to have a lot of rocks in them, and they are not very compacted. So when you're growing carrots and you want them to actually grow tender and long like that, you're gonna want very loose soil that is not filled with rocks. Now, my native soil here is clay rich, and I tend to get very funny looking carrots. They do taste good, but they don't ever grow as big as I'd like. But in raised beds, they could grow all the way down until they hit some hard earth or maybe a rock. And in this case, this is a well over 1 foot tall bed, and that's going to be plenty of space. So the next thing I want to talk about is moisture. It just rained this weekend. It's actually the first rain we've had in 10 months, something crazy like that. So right now my soil is really well hydrated. In particular, even on the surface level, if I move the very top, it is nice and damp, and that is exactly what you want when you grow carrots. Whenever you're starting carrots from seed, the most challenging thing by far is getting them to germinate. Everything after that is basically autopilot. The reason why they're so hard to germinate is that if they dry out for a single day, those carrots are not happening. They're not going to grow. So this is why we want to start with very wet soil to begin with. The next thing I want to do is find where my drip lines are, because I'm going to plant right against them to maintain that soil moisture in a guaranteed way. Being next to the drip lines helps. So that's why I've pulled them all up onto the surface level. You can see them now. And now you want to take your hand, go onto the surface of the soil right next to your drip line where you're planning on sowing these. And you want to just kind of rake away all the big chunky stuff that tends to sit on the very surface of your soil. Up here you can see all the chunky stuff I pulled aside, and as we work our way down, you'll notice that right here, the soil is much finer. That's going to help your germination, because the finer the soil is, the better contact it's going to have with your seeds. Once we've got all the chunky stuff out of the way, I like to make sure the soil is literally wet where I put the seed. Helps it stick, helps it get wet immediately, and again, should improve germination. We're gonna do a light watering because we don't wanna move stuff around. We just wanna get that surface a little bit wet. So now let's get some carrots in the ground. First step is Tender Sweet, just because I grabbed it first. And I'm going to do something I've shown you guys before whenever I start small seeds, which is I open the packet, I choose one side, and then I force a crease. So I just pinch it down like so until I create a little furrow or channel. And now what happens is when I start tapping my seed, just like this on the top of my wrist, that seed will actually climb its way up and out of the packet. So just like this, I'm gonna be focusing on the soil. And as soon as I see stuff hit the soil, ooh, a little windy there. There we go. Now I'm getting some seed. One thing you might have seen just there is that as I was doing it, multiple seeds were coming out. I'm not trying to be particular and perfect about my spacing. It's very easy to thin them after the fact as long as you don't go insane with your seeds. So I think that was a reasonable amount. It was like basically 2 to 3 seeds in every spot where I'd want a carrot. Now, here's the thing, is that not every seed's going to make it. Again, remember, it's tricky to germinate, so having a little bit of extra seed doesn't hurt, but don't go overboard because you're going to really regret it later when you have to come through and remove those extra seedlings. So that was a reasonable amount. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do a second row right next to it. And you wanna get close because these seeds are small and they tend to move around. That is why it is helpful to sort of clear the area you're working in so you could easily see the soil itself. It also helps the seeds themselves fall right where you want it. If I just left this a flat surface, the chance of me getting the seed exactly into this area is going to be a little bit harder. And ultimately, does that matter? No, but for aesthetics, it's nice. And for spacing, it is nice as well. Now, if I shake it like this, it feels very scary. Nothing's happening. There we go. So I'm gonna stick to the tapping the back of my wrist method. So that is 2 rows of Tender Sweet. Now let's get the rest in. Scarlet Nance, red core chantenay. At this point, the carrot seeds are in your raised bed, and it's just a matter of covering them up. Now you can use the material that was already in your raised bed, but if it's very chunky like mine is, because I just topped this with a very coarse compost recently, what I like to do instead is just go find one of the old grow bags that I had from earlier in the season, which is exactly what this is. And I like to just use a little bit of old potting soil. Potting soil tends to be finer already, and it's easier to get wet at the beginning anyway, which is again going to help our carrot germination. Now you don't want to put too much. These carrot seeds are not big, so you don't want to cover them up with a substantial amount of soil. You basically just want to cover them up just enough. And now this all might seem like crazy, like, Jacques, why are you doing all this complicated stuff just to start carrots? You don't have to do this. You could keep it very simple, just throw your carrot seeds across the soil, try to cover them up loosely and hope for the best. The reason why I am doing this is because I do not have rains here. I do not have reliable rains. I can't just run my irrigation all the time. And I want to guarantee that these carrots succeed. Because if they don't succeed, I am just going to be wasting 2 weeks after 2 weeks starting new carrot seeds every time, because it takes about 2 weeks for carrots to germinate. So this is all about guaranteeing that this not only succeeds, but that I don't waste any time in the end. I want these carrots for spring, and every 2 week delay is just pushing it later and later into the season, where I'm really gonna actually want this bed back for other crops, and also it's just going to get too hot for tasty, sweet carrots. So we're gonna cover this up with this potting soil, and I'll show you one last step. I actually lied to you guys, there's 2 more steps to follow. The first is to take your hand, which is now probably dirty, go through and press down on your carrot seeds where you just spread that soil. Again, what that is going to do is ensure there's good contact of that seed with your wet soil. And that is again going to just improve the chances that every single carrot you just put in will actually germinate. And then finally, one more coat of water. If you guys didn't think I was going crazy for these carrots already, here is the true final step, which is to cover those carrots up with something like cardboard. Now in this case, the reason why I'm doing this is, I think, a little bit obvious. If you remember, at the start of this bed, when I first showed it to you, it had just been dug up by raccoons the previous night. So this cardboard is doing 2 things. First, it's going to seal in all of this moisture, stop the surface from evaporating from the sun, from the wind. It will improve our chances of germination. But second, it's going to block up the raccoons from digging up all these carrot seeds that I just put here, which would make me extremely upset if that were the case. So what I'm going to do here is staple this cardboard into the earth, or into the raised bed soil, I should say, and that hopefully will keep the raccoons out. So now we should have fantastic carrot germination and protection from any digging pests. I will occasionally come through and water the surface of the cardboard. This helps keep the cardboard wet, which again helps with keeping the moisture in the soil also wet. So this is just a sort of little task that you have to do for the first couple of days. After 10 days, maybe even a week, I would check underneath the cardboard. As soon as you see a single carrot start to emerge, remove your cardboard, because if it doesn't get light, it's going to turn white. And then when it gets hit by the light, it's not going to have a good time. So this is only for the germination. As soon as you see any signs of carrots come up, get anything off the surface and let those carrots have full sun. Now carrots will generally take 2 weeks, but I like to check after a week, maybe 10 days, to make sure I don't miss that important period. So this bed is now flipped. The carrots are in. Let's move on to another section of the garden. Our next project is actually in the greenhouse, and it is to get ready for some spring strawberries. And we're gonna pop in here and I'm gonna show you another problem first, which is right over here. See that? That is a seedling that was pulled out by birds. There's another one over there, a big one back there. Over on this side, this tray got entirely dug up on one side. Luckily, the other side was left and the seeds did successfully germinate. And here's what was happening. Up here, there's these vents. Now they're covered in bird netting, but before they were open, and the birds were literally coming down into the greenhouse and then pecking through all of my seeds. So I don't know how many seedlings I lost in this time period, but now I have them covered up with this bird netting and we should be safe. So let's move on to the next task at hand, which are all of these strawberries down here. Now you might be wondering where I got all of these strawberries that are growing in a flat like this. It is not from seed, it is actually from the runners of the plants that I already own. So all of this right here was free. I have maybe 20 plus strawberry plants in here. that I was able to grow for just the cost of some soil in here, which actually I'm not even really using up. So let's go ahead and pull one of these out. I haven't actually looked at them yet, but they seem to be putting on new leaves, which is a great sign. So right there, what you could see are all of those roots, those white new roots. That is a little chunk of runner that I was able to root and propagate. So this is now a free strawberry plant that I could plant right back in my green stock. So let's get this one in the ground, and I'll show you exactly how I set this up. Now I'm gonna show you how to transplant this strawberry and then take a new cutting from this to propagate more plants. First thing I wanna mention is this part right here, which is the crown of the strawberry plant. You do not wanna bury this under the soil or else it will rot. Also take a look at the roots. We wanna make sure that we get those buried into the soil properly. Now, whenever I'm growing in a green stock, I like to get right up to the edge here so that the plant can spill out and get as much sun as possible. So there's my cavity that I've dug out. Take the strawberry plant, hold it by the leaves, just like that. And you see that crown? That is where we want to fill it up to. And now that I'm holding it this way, all those roots are actually hanging down and are able to get into the soil more easily. So now we've got that new strawberry plant planted in the green stock. The only thing left to do is to water this in to make sure it doesn't dry out, especially since we just transplanted it. We want to get water around those roots so there's no air pockets or sort of weird cavities, and that will ensure that this guy survives. So now let's go ahead and find a strawberry runner, and I'll show you guys how to propagate more free plants. So this is something every strawberry plant will do. They're called runners because they run away from the plant on these long vines. So the mother plant is over here, and this is the runner attached with this cord here, which you kind of think of like an umbilical cord. It's really transferring all of the nutrients from here into this part of this plant to make it actually sustainable. Now, the other cool thing about this is that in the process of making runners, I'm actually also seeing that there are a lot of aphids on this, looks like. A lot of really either aphids or maybe even spider mites. It's hard to say, but that's a problem for another day. It's still perfectly fine to try to take this as a transplant. So what we're going to do here is take a look at the bottom. You'll see that there's generally little roots that come out of it. So I'm going to snip this from the cord, just like that. And now look at the base here. Right there are where all those roots will come up. And right now, the roots don't look that great. They're actually drying out and dying. So this one maybe won't make it. So let's try to find a second one where we could see a little bit more progress on the roots. Here's an interesting example of using the runners without propagating them into something else. This was the mother plant. There is the runner. And what I've done is I stapled it into this part of the green stalk until it was able to root. As soon as I see this new leaf right there, I could come back through and snip away the cord that originally tied it to the mother plant. And now this is its own strawberry plant that's able to live and thrive and set its own root system without any support from the original mother plant. So here's a great example of a runner that we can propagate. The first thing I want to do is remove any of the fruit that might already be forming. So right there, those strawberries, they've got to go because they're stealing energy from the plant. The reason why I chose this one is because you could see the roots right there, those kind of whitish cream colored segments. Those are new roots trying to form. The fact that they still have a little bit of white to them, to me, is signaling that they're alive compared to that first one we got, which is mostly just brown. So odds of that one are a little bit lower. So what we're going to do is, again, snip it away just like that. And this right here, you could take, shove it into soil. I'll show you exactly how you do that. So there's that strawberry runner that we just collected from the green stalk. And here's the same tray where I've been propagating the rest of my strawberry plants. The soil is already wet, which is perfect. So what I'm going to do here is take this chunk down here, and that's going to be the part that I put in the soil. So I'm gonna just make a little clear spot here, anchor it in. And remember, we wanna make sure that top part of the crown is exposed, it's not buried. And I'm just going to nestle it into that soil ever so gently. We don't want to, again, we don't want to bury it. We just want to make sure that it has really good contact with wet soil, and that will allow it to set roots. So right there, that is the one that I just put in, and it should do just fine. The rest of these are rooted. We just need to dig them out and transplant them back in. So free strawberry plants, anyone who has strawberries can do this. You could grow and propagate your strawberries and spread them throughout your yard, give them to friends. But this is a great way to multiply plants for free, and also to keep the ones that you actually enjoy eating. Some of strawberries maybe aren't that good. You don't want to propagate those. Just save the ones that you actually enjoy. So now I know that the rest of my day is going to involve transplanting strawberries from here into my green stock. I also need to take a look at all these seeds. make sure I didn't lose too many from the birds and maybe start some more seeds. But that's it for today, guys. I'll see you next time and good luck in the garden.